Hey, everybody. I just finished recording an hour with medium and angel intuitive Michelle Clare. She has a story that takes you on a roller coaster, 3 near-death experiences and some trauma only 6 months ago that actually opened her to even greater abilities. So I know you're going to find great hope and inspiration from our time together. Stick around to the very end of the program because Michelle shares some beautiful nuggets of wisdom. Tune in now and enjoy. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited about today's show. My guest is Michelle Clare. Not only is she a wonderful medium, an angel intuitive, and a healer, she's also a dear friend of mine. I know that you'll see why I feel such a resonance with her as soon as I bring her on screen, which is right now. Hi, Michelle. Welcome to the show.
Hi, beautiful Suzanne. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I look forward to seeing you very shortly. We're going to be together in Arizona, where I'm speaking at the Sedona Ascension Retreat. But meanwhile, looking forward to letting you share your story with everybody who's listening. We all love to hear about angels. We love talking about connecting with loved ones across the veil. But everybody, Michelle's been through an awful lot in the last year. And she is absolute evidence that just because we're connected to angels and guides and talk to people and about healing doesn't mean that we don't go through our own tragedies and challenges. And she certainly has. We'll get to that, so stay with us. But Michelle, you are a 3-time near-death experience survivor. So I'd really like to go into those as well. Let's start with the question, have you always been aware of the spirits of loved ones who have passed and the angelic realm?
So I did always have an awareness around that. When I was 12, my grandfather passed, and I knew he and I were still communicating. I would share that with my mom, and she would say, well, that's what you think Grandpa would say if he was still here. So I really quickly learned that was just my connection with Grandpa. And at that point in time, I wasn't having it with other people's loved ones, but I was always aware of an angelic presence.
Huh. Did you see him or just sense him?
I would see him in my mind and I would sense him around me.
Okay. So that was just with your own loved one. What about other people's loved ones?
Not at that point in time. At that point in time, it was just my special connection with Grandpa.
All right. So what opened you to the greater reality in such a way that you could be now doing it as a professional?
Right. So it actually happened with each near-death experience. I opened up more and more. And with my first one, which happened in April of 2000, I was in a hospital seeing my sister-in-law who had just had a baby that day. And I was talking to her RN, who was my friend from high school. And we're in the hallway, right? You know how spirit likes to bring people around into our lives again. And we were out there talking, catching up, and all of a sudden I had this massive seizure. And what I remember is opening my eyes, and I was laying with my head in my grandma's lap, and my grandma had transitioned a couple years before that. And as I looked up at her, she was the youngest, healthiest version of her that I could remember. She had such beautiful, glowy skin. And I started to just look around, and I was in this, what appeared to be like a white room, except that the walls were alive. So every cell or every molecule was almost breathing and radiating this light and love. And I was aware there was no time here. It was just everything. Had no
there because I had a challenging last 24 hours and my soul is saying, I needed to hear this. I needed this reminder, right? We look around us and we see hard walls and hard everything, but I totally get what you're saying. Take your time with these stories. They're healing for all of us.
Oh, thank you. So as I was laying there with my head in my grandma's lap, I looked up next to her and there was this beautiful 12-foot angel. She was huge, magnificent, radiant. I remember feeling drawn or almost sucked into her presence in such a beautiful way, kind of the way you would imagine going into a wormhole or something like that, just like whoop. And as I was pulled into her energy, I even felt more unconditional love. And I felt this energy around her about she truly knew me inside and out and had always known me. And as I looked at her, I went to look for her feather wings. I was raised Catholic. We all know, look at my statues. Angels have feather wings, right? But her wings were actually made of light, and they were iridescent and translucent, and they seemed to span eternity. And as I was really just being energetically soaked in her presence, I thought to myself, what is your name? And she answered me telepathically, and she said, my name's Madeline. I'm one of your guardian angels. And I was a little startled because at that point in my life, I didn't know about telepathic communication. And well, how does she know what I'm thinking? But it was so beautiful. And so I was really just in this beautiful, loving space with my grandma and this angel, really getting this upgrade to the angelic realm, is what I would call it in hindsight. And then the next thing I know, I hear someone yelling, code, code, because I had quit breathing and I was already in the hospital. And I am shoved back into my body. And it felt like I dropped out of a 10-story building. It felt heavy, dense. I remember my arm felt like it weighed 500 pounds. And so with that, with a lot of near-death experiencers, I didn't know what that was called. I knew I had an experience, but it took me weeks before I told my mom about it because I didn't know how to translate that into words. And also I didn't know what happened. I just knew I had an experience.
Now, my curiosity is that you would describe that so clearly. And I have a very strong sense it's not because you've told it so often, it's because it was more real than real, as most NDE experiencers say. Is that the case?
Absolutely. Each one of those experiences is more real and more vibrant. I want to use the word vibrant than our everyday human life. And I think because of that, I was just talking to someone about this morning. When we're in that near-death experience space, we have to understand the transmission of energy and love is coming in on every level. So in our humanness, we have our 5 senses that we're receiving input from. But when you're in spirit world and you're having these near-death experiences, everything is transmitting a whole nother vibration and frequency. And I believe that is really a lot of what makes it so much more vibrant and real than this earth plane.
Very cool. Wow. Were you aware of having a body of some kind? You said your head was in your grandmother's lap, so clearly you had a head, but did you happen to take the time to look down and see a body?
I did perceive a body. I did feel like I had a body and I was laying there, but I remember it felt very light. Like I would have felt like I had lost, 80 pounds or something. I felt very light and very,
Agree with that. So she's a tiny thing, everybody. When you meet her in person, it's just so beautiful. So I just tried to imagine what your friend, the RN, must have thought. Like, oh my God, what is going on here? You're having this perfectly normal conversation. Just out of curiosity, did they determine what had physically happened with you?
So they just determined I had had a massive seizure and I had never had one prior and I've never had one since.
See, I'm hearing in my head set up like that's a spirit thing that just said it's time to get this journey into first gear. Let's give her a wake-up call, a remembrance of what it's all about, where you come from. So, all right, take us to what happened next.
Okay, so the second one happened in May of 2006. And at that, so about 6 years later, I had my son. So at this point in my life, I'm married. I have 3 kids, 5, 2.5, and an infant. And when I had my son, I had had a lot of complications with him. So I was in and out of the hospital for 6 weeks after I had him. I'd go in for 5 days, come home for 2, get readmitted. It was a long process. And finally, they said to me, we need to do a DNC that will just clear everything up. It's an outpatient procedure. You'll stay home after that. So I said, okay. And the night before, I just had a pit in my stomach and I thought I needed to cancel it and not go through with it. But they had let me know how easy it would be and how my life would return to normal. So I went through with it. And the next morning, I go to the hospital. I've questioned the doctor again and the anesthesiologist. Once again, they reassure me this is going to be fine. You'll be able to stay home after this. I say, okay. I had had anesthesia before, and when I'd had anesthesia, it was just a blank space. There was no dreaming, there's nothing vivid, just a blank. I remember counting backwards for the anesthesiologist, and the next thing I know, my beautiful white German Shepherd, who had transitioned a couple years before that, walks into the operating room, lays her head on my gurney, takes a look at me like she always did, checking in on me. And the next thing I know, we are on this amazing beach. And on this beach, there are colors that we don't have here. There are emotions, I want to say. There are sight, sound, smells. You're clearly not on planet Earth. It's so much more vibrant. Once again, every cell, every molecule is radiating this light and love. And I like to compare this to, when you're looking at a beautiful tree and the sunlight comes through the leaf just right, and it looks like it's being lit up from the inside.
Yeah.
That's how it is there. Everything is lit up from the inside. And
It's really making this place seem very, very dull and flat. Yeah.
Yeah. So everything is radiating this light and love. And I'm with my beautiful dog on this beach. And once again, we are having this telepathic transmission of energy, this communication. I know that she's so happy to see me. We are running and running on this beach. She looks young, vibrant, healthy. And really, as we're running, at some point, I notice, we're not getting hot or tired or thirsty. And I start noticing that I'm so present. It is really just each breath and each step that I am taking. I have never been that present before in my life. And as we are there, here's the funny thing about that. I actually hate to run. I will tell people, if you see me running, call 911. This is like not Michelle out for a jog. But as I'm doing this, I'm loving it, right? Because I'm having this beautiful experience with my dog. While I'm with her on the beach, all of a sudden there is part of me that is drawn to my son, who was 6 weeks old, and he was at home with my mom. And I feel myself go to him. As I found out in this near-death experience, our soul can be in more than one place at a time.
Yes, I've heard this.
Yep. And so I'm with him, and he's really scared because I'm getting ready to leave. And if you think about that connection, he was just 6 weeks old. And so as I'm with him, I said, I will find a way to stay. I'm not going to leave you. And I start praying and I start saying, it's not my time. I need help. My children still need me. The next thing I know, I'm back in the operating room. Jesus comes in as my friend. Let me help you. I'm here. How can I be of service? The operating room lights up with this beautiful white golden light. And the next thing I know, I'm waking up in post-op, and my 45-minute procedure had turned into a 3.5-hour emergency surgery because they had ruptured my uterus in 2 places and missed my artery by 1 millimeter.
You're not the easiest person on medical personnel.
No.
Wow. Okay. So, and I'm sure that recovery was horrendous.
Yes, that one.
A new mom too. Oh.
Yeah, that took me about 4 months to get back to 80% level of functioning, because when they had ruptured the uterus, they had pushed the infection into my body. So then I was running fevers and on IVs, and yes, it was quite traumatic. Once again, with this experience, I don't have the words near-death experience. I don't know exactly what happened. But it's more real and more vivid than earthly life. And it feels more real when you're in it. One of the most beautiful things about this I was raised Catholic, so I did believe in Jesus and the angels and Mother Mary and all of that, but really being able to see Jesus walk in as my friend, not bow down and pray to me, but as like, I am here, I am your best friend. How can I help you?
That is how he has appeared to me, and I wasn't even raised with Jesus. So it's just very comforting and beautiful, very affirming. Yeah. So did this change anything for you, these 2 events yet, or did it take the 3rd one to open you up to, I can connect lucidly in waking consciousness?
Yeah, I'm a hard nut to crack, I guess. It took the third one to really push me into that. Both of these were very important and relevant in the sense that I do believe I became so much more aware of angels, Jesus, the spiritual connection. So they were very necessary in my awareness for me to realize that we had so much more help available than we usually reach out for. But it's not until the third near-death experience where I really realized, oh, okay, this is big.
Let's go there.
Okay, that one happened on 11/1/11. So for people who like numbers, there's lots of ones in that. I was up on a ladder. I have 14-foot ceilings in my house, and about
11/1, November 1st, 2011. Okay, all right. Wow. So you're up on a ladder. Okay.
Yes. And I have 14-foot ceilings, so about 12 feet off the ground. I have battery operated candles, and my younger two kids were home. I said, let me just change the batteries. We're going to go get your sister from school after this. So I climb up the ladder, and as I get to the top, I feel it start to shift. And I remember thinking, this is going to hurt. And at that moment, I am ripped out of my body, not in a painful way, but in a fast way.
Before you feel the pain.
Yes.
I want to just pause right here because this came up for me earlier today also, this message that the soul just puts us in this state that we don't experience pain. So anybody who has a loved one who passed by an accident or some kind of trauma, physical trauma, I have heard this over and over from people who survived experiences like this and people who are across the veil in my mediumship readings. So it's very comforting.
It is. In all of my near-death experiences, I never felt the trauma my body went through. Now, when I came back, I had the physical recovery, but during those moments, I didn't. And so, yes, I am ripped out of my body very quickly. I am actually...
Let me stop you a second, though. Even saying ripped out of your body, that has a little bit of a violent nature to it, but you just mean quickly you're aware you're not in your body, right?
Yeah, I would say think of it like bungee cord. When you're like, whoo, you're just...
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'll find a better word for that. You're right. Rip does sound
good, because to me it sounds like
yeah. So it was so quick. So I'm out of my body.
Catapulted.
There you go. I like that. I will use that now. Thank you. So I'm catapulted out of my body, turned around facing my body and the ladder suspended in the air. And I'm standing with these three people that I don't know. I've never met them, but they feel like close family or friends. There's an Egyptian woman, an Asian man, and a Hawaiian man. Wow. And as I'm standing again in this unconditional, blissful love, this timeless space, they said to me, what do you want to do? Do you want to stay or do you want to go?
Ooh, nothing like a big decision on the spot.
Right. And for me, I was really trying to understand it because I was looking at my body thinking it's going to hit the floor in a second, but I had forever to decide. They weren't rushing me. Time stood still. And in this time standing still moment was the most pivotal moment of my life, because as I was in that space, I saw my two younger kids in the kitchen and I said, I need to stay. And actually, right before I said that, I saw this beautiful angel come in, different than my first near-death experience. This angel was dressed in red and gold. And when I saw this angel, I knew it was either there to take me home to that heavenly realm or to shift something so that I could stay. And I made that decision when I saw my kids that I needed to stay. And in that moment, I was downloaded with a lot of information where I was told, okay, but Michelle, you've got to go back and you've got to do your mediumship in the way that only you can do it. I was told that my marriage would probably end in divorce. I was told that there would be more trauma. There was a lot of information that came through. And when I say mediumship the way that only I can do it, you and I both know there are so many amazing mediums in this world, but
I ask, what is the way that only you can do it? So we'll get to that.
Okay. Yeah. And so with that being said, I made this decision to come back. And I think this is really important for people to know too, is that I vividly remember standing in that heavenly realm, being told your 25-year marriage is going to end in divorce. You're going to have more trauma and all of these things. And in spirit world, I'm like, okay, send me in. Okay, I've got this. Right.
Yeah.
Then I come back and the human Michelle says, what? Who would have ever signed up for this? Even though I remember saying, send me back. So I end up falling. The back of my head hits the corner of my granite island. I have a 5.5-inch skull fracture. I have a brain bleed. I lose my taste, my smell, my hearing, my equilibrium. But I survived the fall by 1/2 inch because that was how much I missed my brainstem by.
Mm. Mm, 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 mm. Wow. When did you come to?
At some point, before the ambulance got there, but I don't know when. My younger 2 kids actually ended up calling 911. But let me give you this story because this is I know why Spirit prompted you on that. I can feel it. So what happened was my daughter calls 911, the ambulance comes, they take me to the hospital. I'm in ICU for a while and in the hospital. But one of the miracles was my skull did not indent and the bleeding stopped on its own. So I didn't end up having to have brain surgery, which was a gift. So as time goes on, this happened on 11/1/11. We find out that my son, who was 5 at the time, had tried to call 911 and his call did not go through. So come January of 2012, my son started getting depressed. He would say, I didn't do anything to help you. My call didn't go through. And he would tell this to myself, my mom, my mother-in-law. And we would say, Josh, you opened the door for the policeman. You helped, like you let help in the house. And there was nothing I could do to really help him overcome this feeling that he had let me down. So the end of January, my grandfather, who passed when I was 12, came through to me in a huge visit. He actually manifested in front of me. This is the only time I've seen that happen. And he talked to me about my accident, my head injury, and about my son. They'd never walked this earth at the same time. And he said to me, he's really good with electronics. There's something you should know. You need to get the 911 recording.
Oh, wow.
I didn't even know I could get the 911 recording. So I go and I order it. It takes a couple of weeks to come in and I put it in to play it. And I hear them say, 911, what's your emergency? And in his little broken voice, my son, Josh, says, Sophie, what do I say? And he laid the phone down. He had called right when the trauma happened and had actually forgotten that his call had gone through. So for the next minute and a half, you can hear 911 saying, can you hear us? What's happening? You can hear the kids talking in the background. And my son says to my daughter, I'm going to go push the panic alarm on the house. And she says, hold on, let me try calling 911. She hangs up the phone, calls back, and her call goes through. Both of their calls went through. When he came home from kindergarten that day, I said to him, Josh, your call went through. Help was coming. And it was as if I had lifted this 10,000-pound weight off this 5-year-old little boy. And I watched his self-worth just flood back in and his pride and his happiness. That was my first huge mediumship visit after that near-death experience.
And the beautiful thing is you acted on it. So many people say, oh, it's my imagination, but you actually to go to the trouble of following your grandfather's, suggestion and getting that recording. We all have to work in conjunction. So bravo.
No, thank you. Yeah. And at that point in time, I really understood the gravity of mediumship on a whole nother level because I watched it change my son's life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's jump to how you started tuning into other people's loved ones.
Right. So at first, well, I'll be honest, then I went to counseling because I was like, okay, this is crazy. I'm talking to dead people, right?
But more than just your grandfather now?
Yeah. So at this point in time, what happens is I start getting what I would call like downloads from people where I just get this stamp of information. And I wasn't searching for it. I wasn't asking for it. It just started happening to me. So I started going to counseling because I thought I remembered what Spirit had told me, but I also didn't know how that was going to look. So I start going to counseling and I'm led to the perfect counselor who says, Michelle, what a gift. We need to get you a mentor. Oh, so I started mentoring then, and I mentored for quite a few years. And with that, in that time period, I really learned how to hone it or train it or do what I would say on demand. And so that I was really able to start refining it and making those connections. But for the first year when that would happen, it wasn't actually because I was using my gifts. I didn't know how to do that yet. It was just, here's the information, and it would come in like a download. And then I'd have to go call my friend or whoever and say, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe this, but your husband came through and he told me, you know, and share the messages that way.
Wow. Wow. That is a spirit setup with the counselor, because many of them would have given you completely different advice.
Absolutely.
Your calling, your path. So you started doing readings your own way, you said. I want to hear about mediumship your way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know just like you, so many amazing mediums, but I think because we all have a different energy vibration that we are on, we have a different presentation and we connect with different things. So for me, when I'm in a reading, not only do I connect with loved ones in spirit, but I'll connect with angels or life guides. Sometimes some psychic information comes through, or medical intuition. And so for each person, we do it differently. And there are different people in the world that need the difference. They, like, some people will resonate more with you than me or whatever. And we're all light workers. We're all here to serve and remind people that they're still connected. But because everyone has a different vibration or frequency, it's about doing it the way that we came to do it, or the way that our soul resonates with.
I couldn't agree more. And it's just like that. You were sent to just the right counselor. You may think you chose that counselor, but everything's a setup. You know, I can see those two big angels behind you, right? Just kind of guiding you. This is the one for you. And that's why people would come to you, because they are guided to your style as versus somebody else that has another style. So that's wonderful. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know that you did ultimately end up getting that divorce that was foreseen, right? And the trauma, would you say that, well, we all go through multiple traumas in our life, but would you feel it is the one that you went through in the last year?
No, it was part of the trauma, but it was, that divorce took 2 years. So there's trauma around that divorce too. But that was not the major trauma. The major trauma was that in this last August, my life partner transitioned by suicide.
That's what I was alluding to. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got divorced, and then you entered into a relationship. And I remember getting a call from a mutual friend of ours, just stunned, to say, did you hear about Michelle's partner, you know, took his own life? And why don't you share that with us? Because this is what I want everybody to know. Again, you know, here you were told by the angels you're going to go back and you're going to have some trauma, and you just didn't see this coming, as far as I'm aware.
Right. Absolutely. I didn't. I knew that he had had depression at times, but even his ex-wife and daughters would say, you know, he was the happiest they had seen him at that point in time. We were planning our future. Things were looking great. And I had gone out of town. And in the past, there had been a couple times where he had had a depressed weekend or depression episode. And during those times, he had said, you know, he turned off his phone, just stayed in bed for a couple days, didn't respond to email or anything like that. So when I got home from being out of town, I had texted him and I didn't hear back. And I thought, well, maybe he's having one of those days. And the next day, I called his work and they said he had called in sick, and I drove by his place and I saw his car and his daughter's car outside. So I assumed he was having that time and needed that space. And then we had a party we were supposed to go to that he was excited to go to too. And I had not heard from him. And I had gone by and once again assumed he was having this time, called his work again. So I go to the party. I come home that night. And I'm actually in my bathroom getting ready for bed. And I feel him come in and stand behind me.
Oh boy.
And I know that this is mediumship and that is not what I want to be doing in this situation. And he says to me, because he always used to tell me that I was so beautiful, he says to me, "You sure are beautiful." And when he says that, I feel my body just start to collapse below me. And I make it to my bed and I am hysterical because I don't want this to be mediumship for a million reasons. I want him to still be in his body. And at that point in time, I lay down on my bed crying. I felt him lay behind me. He put his arm over me and he said, "I wanted to be the one to tell you."
Hmm. Wow.
Yeah. So I texted his sister and I found out a few hours later, she confirmed that he had transitioned by suicide.
Wow. Hmm. I don't even know where to go with that, so I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. um, Worst moment of my life. I mean, it really was. And there was a lot that I had to work through on that, because as anyone who knows that loses a loved one or loses a loved one to suicide, there are just so many layers of grief that happened. And so on my journey of healing, which is still continuing because that was just 6 months ago, right? I've done a lot of deep diving into soul plans, and specifically into my soul plan and his soul plan. And one of the things that I know, I have had connections with him since he's passed, and I've had some great friends who've reached out and he's gotten messages to me other ways. I know that he wasn't destined to leave by suicide. I don't believe anyone is, but I believe that it's an option that actually we all have in this realm. Most likely, most of us are not going to take it, but it's an option available.
That's
And
exactly what has come through when I've questioned experts in soul planning, like Rob Schwartz, who was on the show recently. When I've asked my own guides, same answer, as if in the case of your partner, the guides before he came in would say, "Are you sure you want to take on a body that's prone to depression?" And, yeah, I'd like to try that kind
yeah,
of.
absolutely. And so really one of the things that I found, and I'm just going to speak to my relationship with him and my soul plan with him, was that he actually stayed on this earth longer so that I could feel his love. And that for me, my soul plan was that if I can feel that type of love and connection, it will be worth it if you should choose to leave that way.
Just
Um,
could feel that's what that kind of love feels like.
mhm.
But then the human says, "But now that I felt this, why can't I have more of that?" Right?
Right, absolutely. I would say one of the hardest things with suicide is, in my mind, I wanted the happy ending or the breakup, and now there's neither of those options for me.
Boy, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, and so as that goes on, here's the thing that I've really found that I've had to do, some of my tools that I've used when I am in those moments of deep, deep grief, on my knees, missing him. I have a choice I have to make, and that choice is I can go down the rabbit hole of what if I hadn't have left town? What if I had known? Would have, should have, could have. Or I can literally stop and say, I am so grateful that I had the opportunity to love you in this life. And that doesn't take away the pain, but it changes the trajectory.
Isn't that right there, that gold nugget right there, just will prove helpful to so many people, because we do go down those rabbit holes, and this is part of our human training, why we come here as souls, to know that we can make a choice how to see each moment, what to think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with all of my spiritual knowledge and my mediumship abilities, I still can't bypass the grief. I'm still human, and I think that's another important thing for people to hear, is that I maybe have a greater understanding than some people, but at the same time, the grief is the grief. And so I have a higher awareness of our soul plans, but I have to be in those moments where it's there and when it's real. But I also realize that we have choices in this, and I know that healing is possible for me. Will I ever be Michelle that I was prior to that experience? No, but it doesn't mean that I can't continue to heal and help people and shine. And I think that's a really important message for anyone dealing with grief or loss.
Yeah. So many new students to mediumship that I teach are there because they want to learn to connect with their own loved ones who have passed. And so many times they'll raise a hand and say, "Can we connect with our loved ones when we are in grief?" So I'd love to hear your answer for that, for anybody learning to connect, but also how did it affect your work? Because that's your profession.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, we can. I think it's easier to connect when we're on a higher vibration, like love. So when I'm really wanting to connect with him, I'll try to put myself back at the night we met or in a good memory energy. and really foster that energy, because it just makes it easier. But we can connect in deep grief, because there have been many times where I am in deep grief and I will hear his voice or his words of comfort when he's coming through to me. It really shifted my readings in a lot of ways. So interestingly enough, I actually went back to work 2 days after he transitioned.
Oh, kidding.
My first reading, it breaks us open, right? Our hearts are more open, our energy's more open. This is what I found. Unbelievably, my readings went to another level, which was not what I was expecting. I thought they would be diminished and heavier, but they weren't, because I could actually feel him standing next to me while I was reading for people, also giving me that energy to upgrade. My first reading back was with a dad who I had read for before, and he's in the mental health world. His only son, Seth, had transitioned by suicide. And about a year prior to that, Seth had come through to me and said, Michelle, you don't understand. My depression was like stage 4 cancer. I was never going to beat it. And in that reading, my first reading back after Gary's suicide, Seth's dad was on the screen, and he came through and he said, Michelle, I heard, I love you so much. I'm so sorry you're having to do this. And as Seth came in, he reminded me of what he had told me a year ago. And it really brought me to this understanding now too, where I can see depression on a different level. And we call it mental illness. Well, for some people, depression is stage 4 cancer. Some people will not be able to beat it or survive it. But it doesn't, at the end of the day, affect their ability to get into that beautiful heavenly realm. They are still welcomed home. They are still embraced with love. And another conscious choice that I had to make.
Hang on just a sec, because I am hearing the guides. You're absolutely not saying that's anybody who's in depression. This is just some people. Just like everybody's cancer journey is different and unique, and we never know. So anybody who's dealing with a loved one with depression, do not panic. We just don't know. That's the mystery of this life. So
Right. Well, and let's touch on that for a minute. Most people live with depression, whether they're going through counseling or on medication or doing other things to heal themselves. This is not the common person. Most people can do this.
okay.
Yeah.
So, remember where we were? I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. I've got to see if I can get back there.
You're still on the reading with Seth and what you learned.
Oh yeah. I mean, what I just learned is that they are always embraced with love, no matter how we get to the other side. We are embraced with love and compassion, period. And because Gary transitioned by suicide, that was my life partner's name, there is part of me that I have to say, okay, his expiration date was also his expiration date. Like, I know that spirit was welcoming him and loving him no matter how he got there. And I think that's a really important message for people too.
That's true. Yeah, I've heard nothing but that as well in my work.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you still hear from him. And does he still stand beside you when you're doing your readings?
He does. And even last week I was giving a talk up in Scottsdale and I felt him come in behind me. I feel him so often.
Wow. Wow. Do you see the spirits?
I don't. Sometimes I will get a little bit of a visual in my mind, but I don't actually usually see them.
Yeah, neither do I. And I know that the people listening or watching will find that interesting. We have these misconceptions, but perhaps you felt what I had, that it causes us to tune in more to who they are instead of how they look.
Right. Yeah. Well, because I think for us, it's really important. It's maybe a clear read because we're feeling the information coming in instead of seeing it. Although I do say it would be so much easier if I could see someone's grandma standing right there and she's just talking to me and I'm repeating what she's saying. It would make it a lot easier.
Okay. Well, you mentioned very briefly before we went on the air that you've had 3 NDEs, but you also have recently had an SDE, which is a shared death experience. We don't get into those too often, so would love if you'd share that SDE with us.
Yeah, I would love to. So this one just happened a couple months ago. It happened on January 2nd, 2024. And I was at the salon getting my hair done back under the dryer. And my lady came back and she said, "Oh, I just had to call 911. We have a man passed out in front of the store." So as I got up and started walking up there, I could feel his soul around me and I heard fentanyl overdose. So spirit's already working. So I walk up there. Right as I get up there, the policeman's walking up to him. They're starting CPR on him. And so I start praying and I start calling in the light and the angels for this gentleman, for the first responders, really just holding that space. And I can feel his soul around me. At that point in time, we actually kind of linked in, is what I would say, because he was not expecting to leave. This was not a planned transition. This was oops. And so I was kind of just, he was looking for me. He could see that I was holding the light for him and the responders, is how I would put that on a soul level. So I see them load him up. I go sit back in my lady's chair, and he and I are still linked in, and I can feel him in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. It was like I was in there with him. He is coding. I can feel them shocking him. I can feel what they are doing to him. I'm still praying, calling in the light, the angels, all the support for everyone involved in this situation. And then I feel him gently release, and he disconnects and he goes to the light. And at that point in time, with my work and being familiar with SDEs, I did know what was happening. So I wasn't confused or frightened or anything. I understood what was happening. But what happened later was about a half hour later when I was driving home, it absolutely triggered my PTSD around Gary's passing and what it must have looked like when the first responders showed up with him and all of those things. And so here goes, right? Michelle goes spirit world, human world. But this happens to me regularly, and all of us, right? We're in there, we're back. We're in there, we're back. And so I actually went home and I had a lot of anxiety and PTSD for about 3 or 4 days. But while I'm in this energy, my angels and my guides keep telling me, but remember, Michelle, that man's soul was right next to you. He was not feeling what was happening to his body. He wasn't feeling the paddles. He wasn't feeling the injections and everything that they were giving to try to bring him back. He had already disconnected from the pain. And I knew that, but I guess I need to be reminded of that. And so this was my shared death experience with that man, which I was able to take those lessons back into my life, reminding myself that when the first responders were working on Gary, he was already home.
Wow. Wow. Were you able to confirm that he had passed, or you didn't even need to, you just knew?
I knew. I couldn't find out for sure because I'm not related to him. So there was no way that I could call the hospital, but I knew. I just felt that disconnection.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Wow. So you talk about calling in the angels, and you say that you are an angel intuitive. Let's talk about angels. I love those two behind you. Just their two postures. You know, this is such a loving gesture, and this is so meaningful. Just looking at those statues gives me such peace.
Oh.
Saw them on your near-death experiences. Just what do we need to know about angels?
Yeah, well, number one, that they are real. And not only are they real, they are here to serve. They want to help us. They are really about love and protection. My understanding is they do play a different role than the life guides. When I was given a choice to stay or go, it was my life guides who said to me, "What do you want to do? Here we are," right?
The three, the Hawaiian, the Asian, the Native American, was it?
Yeah, Egyptian lady. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I did not know they were my life guides because that wasn't a term that I had. I just thought they were the nicest people. But our angels, oh my goodness. So everybody has at least one angel. Many people have more than one angels. They rotate in on our teams. When we are working for special things, if we're working with healing energy, or maybe we're starting a business or whatever it is that we're looking for, there's this whole angelic realm that is wanting to be of service to humanity and each of us. And I think very often we don't think about how much help we have on the other side. And the angelic realm is very untapped for the potential that they would like to bring here.
Yeah, absolutely. That's those unemployed angels that Lorna Byrne talks about. So how do you use them?
Yeah, so I'll use them in a million different ways. Actually, I'll even little ways to big ways. I'll be like, okay, I'm running late. Please get me a parking spot by the front door. So I will use my angels asking for help with little things like parking spots, all the way up to really asking that they are guiding my words in a way so that whoever hears them will receive physical, mental, emotional, spiritual healing in the way that their body and their mind can comprehend and help take them to the bigger level. And so I use them in every way that I can. And what I find very often too, when people come in, I love this. People will always say to me, do I have a guardian angel? Absolutely. You've got at least one, if not more. And the fact is they are also around animals. I've seen them around animals. So I love to think that even our dogs, our cats, your horse, whatever it is, they have angels supporting them on their journey here because their soul is also on a journey on planet Earth and needs a little assistance.
Yeah. Wow. I love it. So how do you use angels in your readings?
Yeah, a lot of times when the angels come in for me, it will depend. If I'm working on somebody doing healing energy work, they'll really guide me to certain areas that we need to go to. They'll give me information on the body. So they're really good about that. They're also really good about saying like, okay, you need to tell her this has been her problem since she was 3 years old. But when she goes back and rectifies like, oh, wait, I am worthy. I do deserve to be happy. This is where the life shifts. And so they're very proactive in wanting to help people really create, I want to use the word, the life that they want to live.
Nice, nice. So your guides, everybody always wants to know what's my guide's name. And mine told me that they don't really have names. They know each other by their light. And I don't know if that's your experience or not, but I'd say ask them, what shall I call you? And they'll give you a name.
That's it. Yes, absolutely. I like to tell people it's like a puppy. When you bring your puppy home, it doesn't care what you call it. You just give it a name and it'll start coming to that.
Perfect. Do you still talk to Jesus?
Oh my gosh, regularly. Yes. Really, I feel Jesus come in a lot of times on readings to help me too, with people that would resonate with him. And what I have found is that best friend that he is, he wants to be that for all of us.
Yeah, we talk about bilocating. He can be everywhere. Yeah,
Mhm.
such great, wonderful, big energy. Wow. So your website states that you're a guide for your life. Like you're a guide to people using all of these modalities. Tell me how a reading with you goes.
Yeah, so if somebody just comes in for like, give me everything you've got, it will really include angels, life guides, loved ones, probably some psychic information and maybe some medical intuition information if we need to focus on that. But I really like to pull from the whole team to give people an all-encompassed reading. So these are, this is their spirit team that has been with them since before they came into Earth. So no one knows them better. So I like to connect with that team and say, okay, what do we have coming up? What are some pitfalls? What healing do we need here? Whether it's a thought, an emotion, is it a connection with dad? Is it a connection with mom on the other side? It's really that time. It should be called the healing hour because that's really what it's focused on.
And you're asking spirit that, not your client, probably.
No, I'm not. Yeah, I know. I like to tell my client, no, you just sit there. Let me do the talking.
Yeah. How do you prepare for a session or open up? What's your practice?
Yeah, so I'll be quiet and meditative before, and then I always have this saying that I've just used for years now, and I just say that any information that comes through me will be in light and love and for this person's highest good. And then with that, because I do know I work closely with Jesus and the angels, I actually feel like they filter the information that comes through. So I'm not going to be a medium who's worried about, oh, is this good or is this bad? Nope, it's good. My team's got this. I trust my team, and I've already set the intention that this will be in light and love and for their highest good. And so then I can really trust it and relax into it. And I think that's something probably, you know this very well. We have to trust our spirit team. We are, like you said, it's a setup. We are the setup. They're telling us what to say.
Absolutely. Well, on this program, our community loves the stories. I love the stories too. Do you have one or two you'd like to share with us that were like really healing sessions that you have permission to share or can share in a way that doesn't give away any confidentiality?
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite ones happened a few years ago, and I was reading for this RN, and she had 8 children. Her mother was dying in hospice, and she was still working full time. And as I'm reading for her, I feel Mother Teresa come in, and I'm like, oh, wow, Mother Teresa's here. and this lady says, well, I worked with her in Calcutta. And I was like, oh, so they actually had a personal relationship, which was even
Oh,
more fun.
good.
And so Mother Teresa comes in and she says to her in the most loving and firm way possible, she says, I never lost myself in service. If I had lost myself, I wouldn't have been able to serve. And so she was talking about how she knew who she was, her connection to source, made the time for herself so that she could help so many people. And it was just amazing to hear her come in and say this to this beautiful woman who was so overwhelmed with life.
Man, that's great. I hope she took it on board, made
Oh,
some.
I think so. I mean, it's Mother Teresa, you better, right?
And again, you don't see normally the spirits, but I have found that if it's a familiar person, like most of us would recognize the shawl or something. Did you have did she flash for you some kind of image that you also just knew this is her?
She did. She flashed me an image. And then the other thing, which I Googled this later, I could feel how slight she was. She was only like 4'11". She's very, very tiny. And I could feel, so a lot of times I'll feel, oh, this guy feels really big. He's 6'4" or whatever. I could feel how tiny she was. So when we got done, I Googled it. I was like, oh, yeah, she was that. Yes. So I got to feel the kind of her size, but that's nothing compared to her soul.
Oh, huge, huh? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's so cool. Wow. You have another one?
Yeah. I do have another one. Because I would say this one is a little bit more challenging. I was reading for a lady who was talking about her grandmother had recently passed, and her grandmother was very, very scared to die. Had a lot of fear around it. And, that's not uncommon, whether those are belief systems that we're going to be judged. And as I would like to say, I never got judged when I was in the light. And I do believe our life review really gives us the opportunity to say, oh, I could have done that better, or I could have done this differently, but there's no one judging us or punishing us. So this woman had a challenging time passing. She was with some people who were not treating her well. And her soul came through, and her soul said, I needed it to be difficult at the end so that I would embrace the light and go, because she knew, this is a soul level plan, that she was going to be scared to die. And if everything was like pretty good, she would have stayed in that fear. But because things were challenging at the end, she was actually able to embrace the light when it came.
The perspective is everything.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Huh. Well, what do people listening need to hear about anything? What is it that most people don't understand or need to know?
Yeah, I would say that they really need to understand that we do have free will. We have it on a soul level and in a human level, but usually it's our perspective. So we always have the opportunity to change the way we're going to look at something. And like I said earlier with Gary, I could stay in those moments where I go down the rabbit hole. What if, should have, could have, or I can say, I am so grateful that I had the opportunity to love you. And so when we can start changing our perspective and shifting it in little ways to big ways, that's really where we become the creator of our life.
Oh, we have just beautiful energy, beautiful attitude. And again, don't we grow from our pain? You can breeze through sharing these stories about your near-death experiences, but every one of them came with a challenging recovery and trauma. And as you mentioned, still going through some PTSD that can be triggered. How are you dealing with that?
Yeah, so I've done a lot of different things. I've done breath work, I've done counseling, I've done biofeedback, I did a pre-life regression with Rob Schwartz, actually. I've had to go about this a little bit more out of the box, the way that works for me. But I think I'm doing really well, because I actually know that I can heal from this. My life will not be the same, but that I can heal. And I also feel like that was part of my soul's plan, that if this was going to happen in this lifetime, I would be able to take something so traumatic to help others with it.
Yeah, it's just very clear the way the lesson you gave us a few minutes ago about how it opened your heart to be doing readings really well 2 days after such trauma is incredible. And I really honor you for that.
Oh, thank you.
You're full-time with this work now, right?
I am, and I have a book that should be coming out soon.
I didn't know. So first of all, your website, michellclare.net, right? Notice
Yes.
CLARE.
Mhm.
Tell us about the book.
Yes, it's a memoir, so it goes into detail on my near-death experiences and my life story. And at the end of the book, I asked Spirit, I said, Spirit, how long would you describe our time is here on Earth? And Spirit said to me, Michelle, in the scope of eternity, your lifetime is just the longest second. So the title of my book became The Longest Second, Emergence of a Medium.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
And the time before we're reunited with our loved ones in spirit, my guides have always said, is the blink of an eye to them. May not
Yes.
seem like it is here, but that's again that perspective.
Right.
What is everybody's purpose, Michelle?
Oh my goodness. Well, I've always found that our purpose is to serve our own soul first, and that by serving our soul, we serve others. So for me, as I serve my soul in my mediumship, because this is what my soul wanted to come to express, that's actually my natural ripple effect, is to help others. But we've got to start by really tuning into, what does our soul find inspirational and fun, and what is our calling in life? And by following that calling, it's just natural that others will be served and helped along the way.
That's right. Whatever it is. Yeah. Doesn't have to be spiritual work.
No.
Any parting advice for anybody?
Mm. I just want everyone to always remember that they have their own spirit team, and that they are surrounded with their loved ones, angels, and life guides in spirit, and that really none of us are on this journey alone. While there are moments that it feels completely alone, that's not the reality of it. And the fact is, we came here on purpose to have this experience, but we're never alone.
Which begs the question, why do you feel most people have such a hard time accepting that or experiencing that?
It's because we're veiled before we come here. So there's kind of an individual energetic veil put on each of us, is the way that Spirit has described it to me. Because if we remembered that heavenly realm and felt that disconnect, we would really be longing to go home more than we already are.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, beautiful. One of the fastest, easiest ways to part the veil I've found is gratitude. Just go to your heart. There's always something to be grateful for, right?
Mhm.
You know, right now, just feeling a lot of gratitude to you for coming on and opening our hearts with your story, which has not been an easy one, but you just have radiated peace and love throughout this hour. So thank you.
No, well, thank you for having me. I am so grateful for you and our connection and this time we've been able to spend together.
Yeah, and looking forward to seeing you in person soon. I want to thank all of you for joining us here. Took away some beautiful nuggets of wisdom, and definitely, if you could see yourselves the way Spirit sees you now, your light is shining brighter just from having dedicated your time to being with us. So see you back here for the next episode. Bye-bye.